All right, I'm back with Natives to Negroes, Part 2, Reclassified. All right, so we're going to discuss how the natives got reclassified into different groups and the games that were played behind them. But initially, how they got introduced to these native people were through the crops, the tobacco, and you could see that their first descriptions and interactions of them they would kind of document and catalog as like black kings and great leaders that they were trading with, as you can see. Tobacconists banked on the appeal of exoticism when they used images of the New World peoples and colonial plantations in their advertisements. In doing so, they drew on iconographic traditions dating back to the late medieval and Renaissance eras. Though the primary source for these black bodies was probably the shop signs, since tobacco advertisements were largely an extension of this popular imagery, engravers also inherited hybrid Native American African figures from maps, travelogues, plays, and other colonial imagery in Georgian Britain. England Yard Code and Robinson Crusoe offer several reasons why Native American and African bodies could be interchanged, including generic use of the term black to describe both groups, the generic use of the term Indian to describe any so-called savage, and the fact that both African and Indians were enslaved. Like modern American advertisements that stress, for instance, bread origin in wholesome Midwestern wheat fields, tobacco shop owners commission local artists to engrave images of the origins of tobacco and imagine Virginia areas where black royalty, feathered black tradesmen, fellow black smokers, or relaxed black laborers appeared to live. All these images suggest a complex interaction among ideologies of empire, the social experience of smoking, and the cultural meanings of tobacco in the late restorations in the Georgian London. When engravers imported New World people into conventions of sensuality that had governed early 17th century tobacco imagery, they invited British smokers to compare their own indulgences in tobacco with those of the cursed pagans. Some Britons found this comparison deeply troubling. Authors derided Englishmen for smoking like Moors. Hmm. We'll come back to that Moors word. All right, we're going to dive into this next book by Paul T. Murray. Who is an Indian? Who is a Negro? How does one decide a person's race? Few Americans have ever had the occasion to ponder deeply these questions. In most cases, the answer is self-evident. A racial label is usually assigned by reference to obvious physical criteria such as skin color, hair texture, and facial characteristics. But in any multiracial society, there are some people who cannot be neatly placed onto one of those limited number of categories. Further, in a society where one's social position depends heavily upon race, resolving questions of racial classification becomes a serious issue. People of mixed race may attempt to improve their position by changing their racial designation. During the Second World War, a small group of Virginia Indians challenged the prevailing system of racial classification. When called to register with the Selective Service System, they listed their race as Indian. Local draft boards, however, would not accept this claim. They recalled that in antebellum days, some of the registrants' ancestors had married free Negroes. Based on this evidence, the board insisted that the proper classification of all alleged Indians was Negro. The Indians were adamant in refusing this designation. It was on some bullshit. Before I go back in, that's just some bullshit. How you gonna come over here later on and then try to tell motherfuckers what they are and who their identity and what their culture is after you done tried your best to strip that shit away? Alright, let's dive back in. So to sum up these next couple pages, it's like they wanted a caste system, and a caste system is basically society being ran upon the skin tones and the color of your skin. So the lighter will be at the top and the darker at the bottom. And the lighter you are, the more privileges and benefits you get. So they didn't want to take no chances with any of these niggas or these Negroes or slaves possibly getting any type of benefits, because they were willing to give some to some Indians if they can claim full native blood, which was kind of like a difficult process, being that it was rigged because they were the ones determining what the fuck native was. They were saying like if you had any African features or if your hair was a little kinkier, if you was too dark, you wasn't like they was on some bullshit.
American and verify that I was here before you got here because you can't say who was here before you got here. And I'm saying I was. Then I got to take my family name and link it back to a place. For instance, if you take the name, let's say York. York will go back to Virginia, Boston, and throughout the Carolinas. You'll even find some Yorks in Louisiana. They just left there. But mainly, the Yorks are in Virginia and somewhere out west with Washakie. So that name can be traced to an environment, VA, where a man called Ben York died. Right? And this guy, Ben York, has been proven to be the name Yusuf Ben Ali. Because he went into the courts in North Carolina and fought for his rights as a Moor because they were captured by the watchmen and shuttled in with the Negroes. You follow that? And mixed in with them and sold as if they were Negroes. And they weren't, they were Moors. So they went into court, fought the case, and won. And they stamped on their papers to be given all the rights of a white citizen in America. This is you. You did this. So I can trace it back to this man here, and then trace him back to the Yamasee tribe of Native Americans. And
the Yamasee Indian tribe were considered darker than the Creeks, a new word coined by Europeans to describe Yamasee bands or clans found on river banks or creeks, also described as Negro. Got some other names in the war we'll get into later. Slave Code of South Carolina. Court records prove that many natives' identities literally changed from Indian to Negro, mulatto, and other from a simple claim by a white citizen attempting to put an Indian in servitude. What became clear was the calculated use of the word Negro in certain Carolina natives, and when the word slave had been used, the research applied to Indians as well. Here we have a Yamasee Indian woman, and the war, I'm going to get into that next episode.